the campaign for constitutional rights is very widely respected nowadays as taking on the issues which the more establishment campaigns perhaps aren't so willing to take on. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got going?
It's been a long time that we've been working at it, and it's one of the few organizations that's actually lasted in the U.S. out of the 60s. We started in the 60s out of the civil rights movement when our lawyers went down to the South and defended the civil rights movement. And the theory always was, or generally was, that we were going to defend movements that were making social change. So it would include everything from the civil rights movement to the anti-war movement in Vietnam, that kind of work for a long time. Haitian liberation, the wars in El Salvador to try and stop those, and it grew, even though it's a very radical organization. Because after 9/11, things shifted a little bit even within my organization, because normally we wouldn't just defend democratic rights without an understanding that these were also rights that were going to change the world in which we live. And that's when we started getting involved in the Guantanamo cases, because even though we might not have didn't agree with the philosophy of some of the people we were representing, etc., the threat to democratic rights and constitutional rights was so deep after 9/11, which continues today, that we decided we had to put ourselves in the forefront of representing the people who were taken to Guantanamo. And we were the first actually human rights group in the United States to take on the Guantanamo cases, including representation of the Tipton Three. And we did it because the fact that you could throw people into an offshore prison without any constitutional rights, never bring them to trial, a practice that's continuing today, was to us cut at the very fabric of a democracy.
Absolutely.
And so we do now both represent movements for social change, as well as what has been probably the major violation of rights in my life, my 30 or 40 years as a lawyer.
But the problem is that they're using this tactic that's sometimes called escaping forwards, but they get over one problem by doing something even worse. So now, it's not just torture in Guantanamo Bay, but it's getting killed in a drone attack in Yemen or something.
As we finally began to win a bit in Guantanamo and got the courts to go to Guantanamo, and got some rights for some people, I think it was decided by Bush and then even more by Obama, why bother to capture people?
Yeah.
Why don't we just kill them?
Yeah.
And I think what's going on is they're saying, let's not mess around. First, let's send a message to the people who we want to, the Muslim world, but particularly in Afghanistan, Yemen, Pakistan, that you touch us, even without taking you to court, we will kill you.
Yeah.
And secondly, they're saying as a policy, it's just easier to kill them. Why should we bother? We have 166 people left in Guantanamo. Why should we let places like the Center for Constitutional Rights or Reprieve or other places try and protect their rights? Let's just not give them any rights. Let's just kill them.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think it's one of the, we could say that Obama has basically expressed and carried out that policy much worse than Bush ever did.
Much
It's
worse.
obviously become major. It's many more drone attacks. We litigated the case on behalf of El Awlaki, the Yemen cleric, a U.S. citizen, who along with his son was droned to death, murdered in Yemen. We went to court. We said, the president can't just order the killing of anyone. How can he do that? He has to go to a court and get the court to actually determine what's going on.
Yeah.
We lost the case. We now have a case we're litigating on behalf of the grandfather of the young boy who was killed, El Awlaki's son, along with his father, El Awlaki, that we're bringing to try and not really get the money, of course that's part of it, but to really get a declaration. You can't just kill people if the president says, I want to kill him. Tomorrow it could be you, it could be the next person.
Of course it could. To think that Obama was a professor of constitutional law.
It seems crazy on every issue. I mean, really. I mean, because this is clearly unconstitutional in our view.
Yeah.
The courts have never said it was constitutional. What the courts have done is avoid the problem. They've said, well, this is a political decision made by a combination of the Congress and the president, or really the president, and we as the court won't interfere in a political decision like that. They've never upheld the constitutionality of this kind of drone killing. And it is shocking. Well, in terms of getting a court resolution, it's a gray area. Yeah. It's like the Libyan war. You know, the Libyan war should have been carried out with the consent of our United States Congress, because any kind of war is required to get the consent of our Congress. The president just decided he's going to go to war with Libya, create this, quote, no-fly zone, bomb people without any consent, unconstitutionally, both, in my view, under the U.S. as well as under the UN. Even though I'm from a legal institution, I'm from a left-wing legal institution, radical legal institution, that still believes that change happens in the streets. And as I began this, our goal is to defend people in the streets who are making change.
Right.
And those people could be, the people who are taking over Occupy Wall Street and taking over Wall Street. There could be the people, demonstrating against drones wherever they are. It could be the Bradley Mannings of the world who allegedly uploaded the documents to WikiLeaks. It could be the Julian Assanges of the world. It's those people who are actually putting their bodies between the oppressed and the oppressor that we believe is where you want to let your legal skills go. Fantastic. You're not going to win a case by knocking on the door and saying, it's time for Obama to stop using drones. Sure, it's important. You have to fill every single niche you can with declaring the policy illegal. You have to be as aggressive as you can. But in the end, it's people taking to the streets.
That's what they were saying. I see Chris Hedges was saying that the system cannot react rationally, even in the interests of the rich.
Chris has been the most clear on this, actually. Coming from his background as a New York Times reporter and going forward now to being the most articulate person about why our entire political legal system is non-functional, and for us to throw our energy into deciding whether Obama ought to win or Romney ought to win. Sure, you could say maybe make the vote, but don't kid yourself that that's how this political system is going to change. Chris put a lot of faith in Occupy Wall Street, and it was a big step, but that's going to take us a number of years to actually realize that kind of street action. But it did change the conversation in the United States.
Yeah, that's right. It did. It brought in the idea of the 1%, and we call our conference the crimes of the 1%.
People understand now that the United States is in terms of industrial powers, may be the greatest differential of wealth from non-wealth. New York City is incredible, the number of well-off compared to the poor, the number of poverty, 15–20% in the United States. 20,000 children in New York City sleep in shelters every single night, where the mayor is worth $14 billion.
Can you give us an update on the Assange and the Bradley Manning cases?
What's happening to whistleblowers, what's happening to Manning, what's happening to Assange, what almost happened to James Risen, who was the Times reporter who exposed the warrantless wiretapping and the attempts to go after, I think, the Iranian computers, etc.
Yeah.
We have to look at what this administration and past administrations are doing to try and suppress the truth. And it is unusual. As the number of whistleblower prosecutions in the United States, people like Bradley Manning, are now at number 6. Prior to that, there were 3 of all prior presidents. And of course, Bradley Manning is the most important one. Bradley Manning, the young soldier, some 5, perhaps 3 million or 4 million documents allegedly uploaded to WikiLeaks. 22 years old when it allegedly happened, 24, 25 now. He's on trial in what's essentially a secret trial. It's the motion part in Fort Meade. I've gone down there. Even the public documents, they don't allow the public to see. And they're trying to bludgeon him into somehow getting information so that they can make sure they can convict Julian Assange. They believe that Bradley Manning knows something about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. He's allegedly uploaded the documents to WikiLeaks, and that their target here is really twofold. It's one, to say, we don't want whistleblowers like Bradley Manning out there anymore. And you have to understand, Manning, when you read his chat logs, the ones we've seen, this was a political act by Bradley Manning. He saw things in Iraq that he was upset by, and he said this has to be exposed. And so it's basically what's happened is this country wants to keep everything secret. We represent Guantanamo detainees. The lawyers who go down to Guantanamo are not allowed to talk about what happened to their clients, even if they're crimes like their clients were tortured.
It seems like a terrible precedent. In England, there was a widespread idea, I'm not a lawyer, that if you found out about criminal wrongdoing, you could not be persecuted for drawing that to the public attention or to the attention of the police or your MP. But that concept seems to have been torn up somewhere down the line.
Yeah, I don't know in UK. UK, obviously, you have your Official Secrets Act, which was probably somewhat worse than what we had for a while. But you did have the concept you're referring to. It seemed easier to get out that material. I don't know if it is anymore, but certainly now it's incredible. You find your client's been tortured, and you can't go public with it without risking jail yourself. Now, maybe more lawyers should do that, but basically that's what would happen. So Manning sees what's going on, whether it's in the collateral murder video or the civilian murders in Iraq, and he exposes it. And what do they do with him? They take Bradley Manning and they put him into essentially an underground cell for 9 months, strip him naked, and do to him what Juan Mendez called cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, probably amounting to torture. That's the UN Rapporteur on Torture, Juan Mendez, who said that about Bradley Manning. Then, of course, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, treated as really public enemy number one. Manning, they want to get, but they really want to get Julian Assange because they want to send a message not just to Julian Assange, but to journalists and publishers all over the world that you take your risk by taking, quote, classified documents and showing them to the public. And so they will do anything, I think, to get a hold of Julian Assange. And there's an interesting parallel with what's going on now in the UK. Is Julian Assange, one of our claims, and I think it's a good one, is not only that there's a prosecution or a persecution of Julian Assange for his activities as a publisher and a journalist, but that if the U.S. ever gets its hands on him, he will be treated like Bradley Manning, and he will be put into solitary, and he will be given special administrative measures called SAMs, where he can't communicate with anybody in the world. Is that Amnesty International in the UK, but the International, basically said that if Julian Assange is sent to the United States, he will likely face the risk of being persecuted for his freedom of speech activities, and he will face torture because of his conditions of confinement. And as we speak today about this, of course, it's the day, I think, in which perhaps the final appeals have been exhausted for the 5 British or the 5 Muslims who are about to be extradited to the United States, Bahar Ahmed and others. And interestingly, Juan Mendez, the UN Rapporteur on Torture, has now said for those people to be sent to the United States, they risk being tortured by their imprisonment. So here you have Julian Assange risking torture if he's imprisoned here, and the 5 about to go, with the UN Rapporteur himself, who himself was tortured in Argentina, saying they risk torture. So you're talking about a country, I think, your own as well as mine, that have basically sunk to a level of lawlessness that is so visible and so outrageous that you have UN rapporteurs and Amnesty International saying the U.S., to the extent it could ever brag about itself as standing for any principle of fair treatment of people, can't do it anymore. Yet, the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. And you have to see that in conjunction with the statute that was, or the regulation or the rule that was passed, the statute that was passed right after 9/11, called the Authorization to Use Military Force. Because what the statute initially did after 9/11 was set up a paradigm that people who should have been treated as alleged criminals, people who engaged in acts of terrorism with the World Trade Center or others, were instead going to be treated under the, quote, laws of war, but the laws of war essentially tailored so that the U.S. could do whatever it wanted to people, which is Guantanamo. Yeah. So rather than arrest people and try them, they would simply throw them into Guantanamo, not let them see the light of day, and hold them indefinitely under the idea that they're like prisoners of war you can hold forever until the, quote, war on terrorism is over. Very bad. We opposed that from the beginning. We said you either treat people as alleged criminals or you release them. There's no other third way to treat people under some amalgam of laws that allows you to do what you want. Then a year ago or so, the Congress passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which Obama signed, that really put into law the principle that you can much broader group of people, including American citizens. And that has caused a huge uproar in the United States. My view is, of course, that uproar ought to have started with the beginning of jailing non-Americans, which it did a little bit. It's not just about Americans. It's about the U.S. being a worldwide warrior that could go to any country in the world, capture anybody it wants, kill them if they want, or capture them and kidnap them and take them to a place like Guantanamo, including U.S. citizens. And because of that, there's been a big outcry. Chris Hedges and others, the journalists, as well as others, have gone to court to try and stop that law. They won an injunction against it in the lowest court, but now the upper court has said we are not going to allow that injunction to continue, and there's going to be a hearing on the Hedges case in the next few months. But I'm not, knowing how our courts act, I'm not necessarily optimistic, but the advantage of that case, like some litigation, is it brought attention to an incredible civil rights and human rights violation.
Yeah, some people might dismiss as internet rumors. I just don't know. I mean, they're saying that they already have arrested American citizens under the NDAA, and that's why Obama was in such a hurry to get the preliminary decision overturned. I don't know if have you heard anything about that?
I don't. Under the old law, the authorization to use military force, of course, they did attempt to arrest U.S. citizens. Jose Padilla was one. He got off a plane in Chicago. He's arrested. He's put into military detention for a number of years. He's tortured. And only when the case was going to go to the Supreme Court on the issue of whether or not you could do that to an American citizen did they decide to try him in a real court. But as far as actual evidence of a U.S. citizen right now, I don't know, but it's certainly possible. There's a lot of people out there in the world with dual citizenship. Jose Padilla was one of them. There's others as well, so it's certainly conceivable that there are U.S. citizens in custody that we just don't know about.
Yeah.
A few months ago, which was not an American citizen, I don't know if you know the case of Warsame. Warsame was picked up off the coast of Africa in a boat, I think. And what they did with him, the U.S. claimed he was a terrorist, and they took him onto a prison ship for a period of 2 months, essentially disappeared him. No lawyer, interrogated him, quote, probably tortured him, and then after 2 months they send a, quote, clean team in which he allegedly confesses. But just think about it. They pick up a guy off the boat, disappear him for 2 months, no one knows anything about him. So that's probably, and that's the one that they decided to go to court with. Who knows who else is out there? Probably many.
Assassinations and, there's
that's assassinations.
I could be assassinated.
This is drones. This is drones.
Yeah.
And as we speak today, there's a big demonstration going on in Pakistan against the drone policy.
Yeah. But
Code Pink is there. I don't know if anybody from the UK. I think Reprieve, maybe Clive is there, etc. But there's a big. But these are assassinations. That's what they are. They're basically some people saying we think this guy's a bad guy. There's no court that approves this guy's a bad guy or not. And they just decide the president checks a box or whatever, writes an authorization, kill him.
Yeah. And there's multiple reports now that they're doing a second strike when the rescuers come. I've seen a couple of independent reports saying that the US military are doing that as well. I don't know if you've seen that.
Well, completely believable, because if you look at the collateral video, which was the first thing that WikiLeaks put out, you see the people in the helicopter, the U.S. soldiers, just wanted to kill as many people as they can, but they killed the 2 Reuters journalists, and then people come out to try and rescue the 2 Reuters journalists, to drag their bodies back. And that's when they continue to fire and where they almost kill young kids in a truck who are nearby trying to rescue the 2 people. And, they have the theory, if you look at the theory, they don't even know the names of a lot of these people that they kill. And their theory is that if they're in the vicinity of someone they want to kill, I don't know what their standard is, whether it's more likely than not, or probably they're bad guys or Al-Qaeda, and they feel they can kill them. That's really their theory. So the rescuers would be in the vicinity, killing.
Well, I very much appreciate it. Perhaps
No, I appreciate you asking me to do this, and good luck at the conference. I'm sorry I can't be there.
Hey, cheers. Thanks for the
Bye-bye.
as well. Cheers.